worship leader in the style of Jeduthun, a hymn of Asaph. My voice to God, I shout, my voice to God, hear me. In the day of my trouble, I sought the Lord. My hand stretched out in the night would not grow numb. My soul refused comfort. I remember God and I groan. I complain and my spirit grows faint. Selah. You hold open the lids of my eyes. I am troubled. I cannot speak. I count up days of old, ancient years. I remembered my music in the night. I communed with my heart. I search my spirit for answers. Will the Lord reject us for all time? Will he never show favour again? Is his love quite gone forever? Is his promise void for all generations? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has anger locked up his compassion? Selah. But I say, this is my weakness. Could the right hand of the Most High change? I will proclaim the deeds of the Lord. I will remember your works of old. I will reflect on your work. I will meditate on your achievements. Your way, O God, is holiness. What God as great as God? You are the God who makes wonder. You know your strength among the peoples. You redeem your people with outstretched arm, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. Selah. The waters saw you, O God. The waters saw you and churned. Even the depths trembled. The thunderheads poured down water. The clouds gave voice. Your arrows flickered around. The voice of your thunder is in the whirlwind. The lightnings lit up the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your path is in the sea. Your road is in the great waters. Your footsteps are unknown. You guided your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. I mean, this psalm very much kind of falls into sort of two parts, really, doesn't it? The kind of lament at the beginning and the more hopeful thing at the hymn at the end. But what are the things that I found fascinating in what you write about it is the way that the Jewish commentators very much focus on the first part, and Christian ones very much on the second. Is that
absolutely? Yes, and it's this theme of sort of night and darkness that I think Rashi, for example, sees as the idea of the reminiscent of the exile. So you've got this sense in the first 11 verses, first 10 verses of, although we don't know what the trouble is, it's interpreted very much in Jewish experience as the night and the exile, the long sojourn in the wilderness and so on, and then in Babylon itself. And that's very much part of Jewish tradition. And it's interesting how that's a much more personal side, and yet the Jewish community is taking it in a very personal way. A bit like we've got in Surely I've Been Afflicted from My Youth, Let Israel Now Say. There's a sense in which you've got the personal and the corporate. And I think that's certainly the Jewish side sees this very much as indicative of the darkness of the exile, a bit like reminding us of 74. Whereas Christians are very quick to pick up allegorical ideas. And of course, we've got a lot about water in the hymn itself, the ancient hymn. And really, you've got, first of all, praising God for national deliverance. That's much more sort of straightforward in verses 11 to 15. And then you've got this sort of hymn in verses 16 to 20, which uses mythological language more about the waters being afraid and the deep trembling, the clouds pouring out water. Lots and lots of sort of language about water. And that's where Christians often found that they could actually see the waters as now a reminder of baptism, and that was very much, you know, going down into the waters and out from the other side. But also, of course, as you rightly showed in your in your own art, and I, as you know, I use that image in my book. This idea of the storm on the lake. You guided your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron, and you've got the storm at sea in the Gospels. And so it's interesting how that's the celebratory side, and that's taken up in the imagery by Christians. The darker side is still a reminder of the exile by Jews.
I mean, it's very interesting that also, I mean, the way the kind of personal and the corporate come together. I mean, one of the things we haven't sadly got time to go into now, but it it's fascinating in your book is is the way that Shakespeare picks up this imagery in Psalm 61, and that because that is very much a personal thing, and that's interesting because it very much links to the way that sort of Malcolm uses the poem.
Exactly. This is a lot of Malcolm's poem that I found, you know, resonated with what I'd read in Christian tradition.
Oh, well, that's always encouraging. You know, I was really interested in what you've just said, Susan, about the way it shifts, if you like. 11 to 15 is the deliverance, and then it goes to a more mythological. That's encouraging to me, because I remember when I was trying to understand this psalm deeply when I was doing my thesis, my doctoral thesis about memory in the sermons of Dunn and Andrews, but I was trying to look at, you know, memory in the Psalms, and this seemed to be such a central psalm. And when you get in 16, the waters saw the waters saw thee and were afraid. The depths also were troubled. I kind of asked myself the question, which waters are these? I mean, they could be the waters of the Red Sea, and we're going to have a reference to that at the end. But somehow these seem to me deeper waters than that. And I wondered whether there was a reference to the waters in the beginning and the dividing the land from the waters, and the authority of God in Genesis with the waters was being perhaps referenced there, which would be interesting because it would be seeing creation and redemption through the same lens.
I don't want to cite Bibles too much, but there's a fantastic group of 3 verses in Isaiah 51, 9 to 11. I teach it, that's why I can remember it. But it's an incredibly clever way of putting together exactly what you're saying, the waters of creation and the waters of the Red Sea being parted, and this battle with the sea. Except I think in the Psalm, it's just so much more poetic. I mean, I love that idea at the very end of your footprints were unseen. You know, that's the sort of, we see the effects, but we don't see the present.
No, that interested me from the Christian perspective, because I was beginning to kind of come towards a theology of redemption, which sees redemption as a new creation. That we're not simply redeemed, we're remade in Christ. And therefore, there's something about the end of this psalm which just made me feel that almost the waters at creation and the parting of the sea, the Red Sea in redemption, are kind of aspects of the same act.
Yes, exactly.
They're equally creative and dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting that, because I mean, as you say, I use the you know, Jesus walking on water with the disciples and things to illustrate this, as did you said Ephraim the Syrian also.
Yes.
I was glad to see. But actually,
did you not know that?
I didn't know that. No.
Oh, you're in good company.
but having said, I mean, of course, in the Gospels that this walking on water and the calming of the storm is all. I mean, it's not just a sort of, you know, random kind of miracles. It's very much this sort of sense that of creation and. Actually, I've just been illustrating. I've gone on to sort of Psalm 93, and with the, you know, the floods have lifted up their voice. I'm working at the moment. I can just show you this huge.
Oh my word!
Oh wow!
Oh my goodness!
Preview.
What straight away we feel it.
but actually, I mean, so that kind of redemption thing, which is very much there in the Psalm and in the Gospels, but I mean, Malcolm, when you make it this very much a personal kind of thing.
Well, the things I was saying earlier were to do with when I first encountered it at depth, you know, in the early 80s, working on my thesis. But when I came to write this in 2020, it did become very personal. It was all the personal struggles that we were going through in lockdown. And funnily enough, the image that people, I mean, the secular media, even the scientific secular media, reached for the image of waves. We had a series of different waves of COVID, and we were going to have, like, when does the wave peak? And are we in a trough? And that kind of thing. And I think for a lot of us, our personal individual experience of it was kind of waves of panic, and then you sort yourself out. So reading this psalm in this, I really loved the, the kind of sleepless nights, and I can't, so I've got to book. And then I remembered.
Yeah.
I thought, and then this deep meditation on the acts of God in the past gives you just stability. I mean, if I were in a boat, I would think of it as putting out the sea anchor or heaving to, and, just saying, okay, let me reach in the midst of these wave after wave. Let me reach for stabilitas, for my grounding in God. And so, but I did want to touch on that, the waves of chaos at the beginning. So he strove against the waves of chaos in the night of my affliction. He rescued me. I was probably thinking back to, is it Psalm 18, with all thy waves have gone over me? And, when they were crying out. Yeah. So yes, I took the first person singular in this one very much, although I was aware that it's got a corporate dimension.
Yeah. Well, it would be nice to hear that in a moment. I mean, I just realised that I haven't welcomed you to these sort of conversations, which I'm delighted if you're joining us for the first time. I ought to just say that they're based on the, as Malcolm was saying, the books that we all three of us were writing during lockdown. So this was David's Crown, Malcolm's 150 poems responding to the 150 psalms. This is volume 3 of Sue's Psalms Through the Centuries, which is the reception history of the psalms, but also it's a sort of commentary as well. And this was my book of praises, which was selections of the illustrated translations that I had done and am, as you see, am still doing of the psalms. Well, perhaps it'd be. I mean, there's an awful lot more we could talk about in this psalm, and but perhaps it'd be nice, Malcolm, to hear that poem and your response, which, as you say, is a very sort of personal response to this psalm.
So Psalm 77, Voce mea ad Dominum. As heaven's mercy falls like gentle rain, I lift my face and let it wash me clean. In all my times of trouble, darkness, pain, I cry to him. I come to him and lean again into the comfort of his grace. And I remember all that he has been to me in all my years of life. I trace once more the story of his steadfast love. He sought me even when I turned my face away from him, descended from above and found me in my hiding place. His might broke up my clouds of darkness, and he strove against the waves of chaos in the night of my affliction, when he rescued me and led me out of darkness into light.
Okay. It is that actually thing of we were talking about before, of remembrance, of just how sort of powerful and healing remembering can be in the midst
of... I wanted to have a kind of turn in the sonnet. Well, it's not really a sonnet, it's a 15-liner, a sort of volta that's there, it seems to me, in verse 11 of the psalm, that it's all this, and then it says, and I said, so I will remember the works of the Lord and call to mind, and that's what changes the tone of everything.
Yes, which is,
it's such an interesting contrast with the one we were doing last time, where the plea was for God to remember and don't forget. And this is now the psalmist playing that same thing. The other thing that struck me particularly in this psalm is the amount of sort of physicality that there is. We've got, hands and souls in verse 2, eyelids, verse 4, the heart and spirit, verse 6, and the hand of Moses and Aaron in verse 20. But then there's also God's right hand in verse 10, God's strong arm in verse 15, God's footprints in verse 17.
Oh, the footprints is wonderful.
Yeah, the physicality as well as the remembering, both human and divine. It's quite interesting.
Well, I think we need to end there, but let's end with the footprints, of which actually comes in one of the earliest of Christian poems, actually, which has this idea of God's footprints on the waters of the so and rescuing us. So anyway, that we must stop, but it is a very rich psalm, and I do recommend people to both read Malcolm Sperm again and to read more of what Sue writes about.